It is a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Tom Cockerell, who's a second-generation dentist in Texas, right? Fort Lauderdale?
No, Fort Worth.
Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes.
Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Lauderdale. Oh, Fort Lauderdale's Florida. Fort Worth, Texas. It's Fort Worth, Texas, then Dallas. What's that city in between? Arlington?
Arlington, right.
And that's where the Cowboys are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful stadium. Dr. Tom Cockerell has practiced general dentistry for 36 years in Fort Worth, Texas. He is the son of a dentist who's now 92. And he's still, who practiced for 60 years in Texas. So what's his secret to living 92 years? Was it,
I think good genes, and he stays active. He lives a very full life of,
so the mercury amalgam didn't kill him? The eugenol didn't kill him. Do you realize when I was in dental school, we still lined our crucibles with pure, what was that, what was that white insulating material that caused cancer?
Asbestos.
Asbestos.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you do that? We lined our crucibles with 100% pure asbestos and then poured up our investment, then stuck it in the oven, heated it up till it was glowing red. We're sitting there taking out glowing red asbestos and quenching it in water.
Well, the key is that we didn't hide it in the walls and in our floors, where I guess it's even more toxic than burning right in front of us.
Yeah, well, it's glowing red hot. And Tom's solo practice focused on the special needs patient treated in the hospital operating room, but now an anesthesiologist joins him in the office 1 full day per week. Mm-hmm. In addition to special needs patient care, Tom has a traditional patient-based offering modern services using digital impression scanning, same-day crown milling, CBCT imaging, implant placement, prosthetics, perio, endo. His practice has a risk-based preventive program using tools available from the Dental Symphony software. And Dr. Cockerell is the CEO of Worthwhile Inc., the creator of Dental Symphony, which is why I called you. I think it's always neat when some dentist starts a business. I mean, forget the S&P 500, forget all the publicly traded companies. Whenever I see a dentist start a company, you know there's got to be a big reason why, a lot of passion, and that's why I wanted to talk to you today. So what's going on with that? How did you go from TomCockerellDDS.com to DentalSymphony.com? What brought all that about?
Yeah, well, I guess it began several years ago when I moved my practice from being paper-based to electronic records, and I did that rather quickly, actually over a weekend.
What year was that?
Say 2000.
Okay, so I did mine in 99. Was it for the Y2K? Did we do it?
No, actually, I just wanted computers in all my ops, and just seemed like that was going to be a good thing. And so when I did that, it was I was a little surprised at how my practice wasn't easier. Actually, it seemed harder, to try to find everything I needed to find on the computer. And I just set in motion some thinking about how, what I thought was missing and what could be better. And that eventually I put together a clinical team and a business team to create some software that would fill in some of the gaps that I felt were missing. And that's where it started. Now we have 5 modules that dentists can use alongside their practice management systems.
So it's not designed to replace Dentrix or EagleSoft or SoftDent or PracticeWorks. It's to augment them? That's
right. It's kind of like DemandForce or Lighthouse 360 are to the business part of the practice. Dental Symphony is to the clinical part. We dig deep into the actual clinical management of patients.
That is very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of peripheral software to help with marketing, recall, notifications, all this, but is this the only one that really augments the clinical?
Well, I don't know if it is or not. We don't see anyone doing what we're doing. If I may, if I can give an example of what we do.
Please.
For instance, one of our modules is called ePatient. That was one of the very first things that our team worked on. That was the process of bringing patients into the office, and then looking at their medical history and trying to provide ways to make it easy for dentists to evaluate the patients very quickly. And so that started with a medical history that was very thorough and required automated follow-up questions for diseases that patients checked off that they had. And so we created that software to do that on an online way through a portal that's connected to the website. When the patients then register into the practice using the software, the dentist is then going to have an output that's very helpful to them to very, very quickly look for risks that might be important, and also have attached to that record drug descriptions, a point of care support center specific to that patient that helps evaluate the patient very quickly. So the dentists are going to feel very confident and competent in managing that patient. So that was the first thing we did was what we call a preclinical assessment, a whole array of services related just to that to help get the patients in and gloved up, ready to start working.
Now that's always been a you must have to update that all the time. I mean, with how many new prescription? I mean, is it updating all prescription drugs and all that too?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even keep straight the antibiotic prophylactic coverage of a joint. I mean, how many times has that changed since I got out of school in '87?
Yeah, a few times. It's funny, isn't it? There are just a few questions to deal with. Antibiotic coverage for heart issues and joints and maybe immunocompromised patients, but it gets confusing, and I find myself having to think, okay, now what do I do? What do I do here? And does this need antibiotics? And so you're right, we do all that. We're going to, in the medical summary report that's created for every patient that registers, we're going to have at the top of that page a list of alerts that are important for dentists, and then a summary of the systematic review of the medical history to answer those kinds of questions. But it is confusing, and the idea of why not have drug descriptions written out right there, available to the dentist on the summary that the dentist gets? It makes it easier. Now,
how many? You said you have 5 portals.
We have 5 modules.
5 modules, and the first module is health history.
That's right. It's a patient portal that brings the information into the practice, and it is a medical history, dental history. You can also have any other forms that are of particular interest to the practice, such as sleep apnea, TMJ, sedation, kinds of whatever special interest is of the practice. That's our first module, or rather, at least the first one we're talking about. The other modules have to do with this spectrum of how a patient is worked up for care, which is where we felt like existing software just wasn't very strong. So the second module is a module that you can use for recording examinations. Third module is what we consider a more friendly, useful perio charting system, which you can use alongside your system. The third is an automated treatment planning engine that allows the dentist just to chart their findings, and then in a matter of seconds get a treatment plan based upon their office preferences or their personal preferences. And this can be anything from full surface-based restorations to a request for a full surgical prosthetic implant case. It will take that charting in just a matter of seconds, create a whole treatment plan for you. It includes all of the ADA codes and associated treatment for a particular choice. And then the last module is a module that is a form to document creation system that allows you to support your treatment plan with information that is important that the patients know, and it's important that the practice provide for patients. That has to do with your a lay report of the clinical findings, your recommendations, your alternative care, how long is the treatment going to take, what the prognosis is, what are the preventive requirements required to make the prognosis, consent forms, financial information. Just a real quick way to put that information into a form and then have generated a packet for the patient that covers all of those things. These were the kinds of services throughout these 5 modules that I just thought, and my team just thought, let's provide a way to do a better job, because How many times do you go in and look at a car, as an example, and you don't even talk to anybody, and you look at that car, and then you walk out with a $15 or $20 brochure about those cars? Yet a dentist can go to a dental office, a patient can go to a dental office and come out with a $500 or $50,000 treatment plan and walk out with an invoice, and that's just about it. Maybe a brochure or something. And really, it ought to be a better way to inform patients about what their problems are, what the solutions are, what are their responsibilities, and it just is, helps the patient make informed decisions, makes the dentist, I think, feel better just about the information that they're walking out with. And there's just not a way. We just didn't find a way to do that, and in existing systems. So this is just a real quick way to do that.
So you think dentists who buy this will actually have more selling of dentistry? They'll have a higher close rate if they're walking out with more information and a brochure. They more likely to schedule treatment, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think anything replaces the personality of the dentist and the office staff, and the ability to help people understand that there are ways to help them. Nothing is better than that. But for one thing, we're required to provide this information. At least, I guess, depends upon what the state or regional laws are. We're required to provide a certain amount of information. Do I think that patients walking out with a nice brochure that provides everything is helpful? I do. I don't think you build your practice around that. You build your practice around the personality. But there are some people, I'm sure, that get these brochures and think, man, I didn't want this. I just tell me how much it's going to cost. And then there are others that come in with them, and they're rolled up, and they're referring to them all the time. So I hope that answers your question, Howard.
Well, let's take a detour on that. Your dad's a 92-year-old dentist. You're 65. I'm 53. Give most of our viewers their kids. They're all under 30. Pretty much all. I mean, maybe I'll get one or two emails of someone over 30. And that's the only reason they send the email, is to say, hey, I'm over 30 and I listen to your show. But what do you said something very important. It's not the brochure that makes them accepted. You said nothing replaces the one-on-one talking as far as on presenting treatment. What tips could you give 30-year-olds and unders about why some dentists can present full mouth dentistry or quadrant dentistry instead of just the patient like pointing to one tooth and saying, we'll just fix this one that's broken a crown?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm thinking about just my own evolution as a clinician. There would be several ways of answering that question. One is, at some point, I got to a point where I just decided, I'm the doctor, the patient's the patient. This is what you need, and let's get after it. As opposed to, let me tell you all the things wrong and what's going to happen, and this is what I'm going to do for you. At some point, I left that behind. But you have to go back to it sometimes. It depends upon the patient. And a good interpersonal relationship between a dentist and a patient is to understand where the patient is with that and what they need. So that's the first thing, is pay attention to what that patient is. Are they listening to you? Are they able to listen? What are the barriers to that? Is fear not letting them hear you? Is our finances worrying them? There are lots of barriers that you got to get past. So that's the first thing, is listen to the patient. I guess the second thing is know what your skills are, and then whatever you're good at, sell it. I mean, really, if you're good at it, you know it'll work, and you've got enough time in practice, then that patients will understand. Patients will pick that up, that you know what you're talking about, and more likely to agree to treatment. So that's a couple of things.
Well, what do you think? What do you think these young kids should get good at? Now you said you got to understand the patient where they're at. You know, is it fear or is it money? Speaking of fear, you bring in a dental anesthesiologist into your office. Is that a dentist who's an anesthesiologist, or is it a nurse anesthetist, or?
Yeah, it's a dentist.
It's a dentist. 1 day a week.
1 full day a week.
Talk about that. How does that work, and how do you keep someone busy 1 day a week just on dental anesthesia? Does he do the dentistry too, or just anesthesia, and then you do the dentistry?
He does the anesthesia, and I do the dentistry. I guess we draw from the region here around Fort Worth, Dallas, North Texas. And over the years, I guess enough people have learned what I'm doing, and dentists know what I'm doing, that they'll refer me patients. A lot of them are special needs, and so we'll schedule 4 or 5 patients in a day, and that's about all we can do. So it's not very hard to keep an anesthesiologist busy. It works real well for us. Did you want to know specifics about what that day's like, or?
Yeah, and explain special needs. That's kind of a broad term. What do you mean when you say special needs?
Yeah,
I mean, could special needs be just fear? I will not let you give me a shot, or is special needs more precise?
Could be that it's just I'm afraid and I just can't stand this and I need to be asleep and I have a lot of work that needs to be done. That's worth considering IV sedation. So special needs to me is mostly about access and about safe access, and that could be limited because of physical problems such as cerebral palsy or any issue that keeps a patient from holding open, holding still, and allowing you to do the work. So special needs is access first. In terms of defining the patient pool, it is mentally handicapped patients that don't understand what needs to be done, and so IV sedation is a good, safe way of managing. Indeed, the severe phobic patient having IV sedation and then trying to accomplish as much as possible in one time is good. Certainly, the medically compromised patients where there's some instability in their health and some risk, then the idea of having an anesthesiologist there with an airway ready and IV and competence that's probably a fair description of that patient pool.
And do you think having a patient pool like this was kind of part of your formation to make you go towards Dental Symphony?
I think so. Yes. I thought about things that I needed to really help me assess this patient well and understand and if their risk for bleeding might be, or risk for a susceptibility to infection, or just general stable or unstable disease, their ability to withstand treatment. As I thought about that, it was pretty clear to me what I needed to know in order to feel safe. Now, I started out in the hospital environment, and so I had to support my diagnosis and treatment plan with a good logic for why we would be in that setting. So that then made us kind of realize, well, who doesn't need to know that? Really, everybody needs to know that, and it's really hard to know that. So how can we make that easier for that dentist to with no effort on their own part, just by registering a patient, having all that information available to them, and a point-of-care center that would explain what the risks are for the diseases that the patient presents with. So you're not going to get a book. You're going to have a center for that patient that is specific for them. So yeah, my personal experiences, was the original driving force for this.
And how much does Dental Symphony cost? Is it a monthly subscription or is it a one-time fee? How does it work?
It is a monthly subscription, $69 for a module, and additional modules, I think, are $15 a piece for each of them.
So 69 plus for the first one, then 15 for each one after?
That's right. Yeah, I believe that's right.
So so for the whole kit and caboodle, what's it?
I think it's like $170 per month.
That seems very low and reasonable.
I think so. I think it's a fantastic deal.
And how many users do you have?
We have around 50 users now around the country. We are poised for growth because of our relationships with one being Dentrix. We've integrated into their G5, G6 program, and so we'll be getting in front of them soon, and we have some other collaborations that are coming. This reminds me, the Dentrix was interested in what we were doing, felt like an integration would give their users a good experience, and Dentrix seemed to be the first to recognize and create a way to augment their programs their software with other app-like devices, which we are. Some of the others are coming on. I understand that I've heard that EagleSoft is going to have an API, which is the way that software can communicate and integrate with desktop systems. So I think it's pretty early in those types of relationships, but it's true. Demandforce and some of the others have paved the way for that, for improving the general experiences of the dental offices with their practice management systems. So we expect to have pretty rapid growth.
So explain why you think Demandforce has helped pave the way.
Well, Demandforce provide and companies like that.
Explain to the viewers what Demandforce is, in case some of these kids don't know what it is.
I don't actually use Demandforce. I use Mojo, which is kind of similar.
Was it Demandforce sold to Intuit, who owns Quicken, for like $1 billion?
I think it was only 400 million.
Oh, it was only 400 million? Okay, well,
yeah,
I was off by 600 million. I thought it was $1 billion deal. But anyway, so what was Demandforce, and what do you think it paved the way with Dentrix for companies like yours?
Well, Demandforce provides services that are obviously not available to, let's say, most practice management system users, like surveys, like text reminders of patients, like looking at pulling their data regarding accounts receivable and analyzing that for more productive ways of managing that. Looking at one slipped my mind. Recall, managing their recall. They provide software optimization, search engine optimization, those types of services that apparently aren't available through the parent system. And in order to do that, they have to be able to pull information from the data base of those systems. Well, that's all in the administrative side, and there are several companies that do that. Not to necessarily repeat myself, but we're on the clinical side rather than the administrative side. Not sure if I'm answering your question, Howard. I want to.
Yeah. So basically, I was saying, how did Demandforce kind of pave the way for your company? But it was in trying to get these companies to open up their software a little bit. I mean, obviously they know their software has many shortcomings, like so they've opened it up. You're saying, so like a Demandforce can help augment the data, and then now you're coming along with Dental Symphony on the clinical side, where you can enter and more augment the data.
Right. Well, I think another way of looking at that is from the dentist's point of view. When we first started, the very first question that we would talk to dentists about was, do you have internet in your office? And half of the people would say, no, well, we don't have that. And then if they said yes, then the next question was, do you have high speed or do you have dial-up? And then those that had high speed we were able to talk to, and that point was...
And what year was that?
That was back in like 2009.
2009. When we started Dentaltown in 1998, only 1% of the dental offices had internet. 1%. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I would have started Dentaltown about 2003.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we had to wait through the iteration.
Oh my God. And the only reason they got the internet connection in 98, 99, because they'd go to a parent-teacher conference and the teachers would convince them that Billy need to go to the NASA Jet Propulsion website to do his homework on the planet Pluto or something. It was always for homework for the kids.
Well, I thought you were going to say that they got the internet because they had to do insurance processing through the internet, which is certainly true. For dental offices that drove a lot. But back to about Demandforce. Once the dentists had their high-speed internet in the office, then somebody had to sort of get through their minds, well, I could use the internet for something that would be helpful for me in the business side of things, and so that just sort of opened up their minds that we're fine. We're not having to fight through the use of apps, in the practice any more than owner of an iPhone has to understand why do I have to make phones better. It's the same thing. So we've had to sort of work through that progression of thought.
So you say you have 50 users, or how many users did you say you have? 50
Customers.
Customers.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
you should go ahead.
I was going to say I have 66 years now on me.
66 years?
How many years? That's how many years I had, and so.
Oh, that you're 66 years old?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, you ought to get them to start a thread on Dental Town where, you know, they just start some thread called Dental Symphony and try to get your users talking about why they like it. I think if they were having a discussion with themselves, it could be a very informative to you of what they're using, how that's working, feedback for you. How many programmers do you have on that?
Right now we have 2. We've had up to 8 at one time when we first were building the bulk of the system. You know, we'd love to have some conversation on Dental Town. It's a very interesting. You were talking about, you know, what makes a dentist create a company. Well, then another question is what makes you create a software as a service software as a service company, and then how does that work? And so the business model for a software as a service company is it's full of good ideas like that. I mean, there are all kinds of growth hacking books written that we read that talk about having our customers help us with the advancement of the program, and so that's certainly is a great idea. We look forward to doing that. Be good feedback.
Yeah, it'd be good feedback for you and your 2 programmers, and then it'd be great sales and marketing for other townies to see their friends talking about it.
Yeah. When I say programmers, I'm talking about you know, the people that are actually banging out code.
Right.
We have other people that, you know, that talk to customers and do demonstrations and work on design and functionality. It's
programmers are very different because, you know, I'll be telling my programmers what I need on Dental Town, and sometimes I'll remind them. They say, Howard, you know, you walk in here and you say, let's just make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He goes, a computer doesn't work that way. I need to know, we need to pick up a slice of bread. Do we put the peanut butter and jelly on side A or B? I mean, it's just, the detail and the coding is just.
Yes, and you know, it's best just to give them a task and then close the door and don't go back in, because the next thing you know, you're interrupting their thought, and that's what I run. And the initial design of a software can be literally thousands of pages of sketching out use case scenarios, and it's just a very interesting project.
So your dad's 92, you're 66. Did any of your kids follow the make it 3rd generation? Any of them in dentistry?
Not a one. I have 3 children, and not a one are the least bit interested in it.
So what do you think was the major change from the way your dad saw the profession at 92, the way you saw it, and what do you predict is going to be the next phase of dentistry?
Well, you know, I would start that answer by saying that about 5 or 6 years ago, my dad went with me to an implant class, a 6-month, 6 weekends down at San Antonio. So he no longer has his license as of a year ago, but he has stayed very active in the profession throughout most of that time, and he had his own private practice for decades and then sold it, and then he would just create a practice in another part of town and work it for a few years, sell it, do that elsewhere, and that was very interesting to him, and got involved in insurance programs that were sort of new wave at that time. So it's not that we're that much different. Nothing jumps out at me as so much difference between how he has done it and how I have done it. I think I'm a little bit old school. I don't have a real big office or a real big staff. I like to think that I stay current and offer, you know, modern services and things, which some of which he wasn't able to avail himself of. But
now, is his wife still alive? 92?
Yes, they're not married, but my mother and dad are both alive at 92. Both
But they're not married?
No.
They separated or divorced?
Mm-hmm.
But they're still. I just think that's very rare. I mean, the average white male in America lives to be 74. So I mean, 84 would be. He's almost beat it by 20 years. What do you think the secret is? Because as we're talking, there's a big article out in Newsweek that talk about the most dangerous occupations to practice in, and dentistry is listed. And they're listing all these occupational hazards. And here's your dad is 92 years old.
Yeah.
So, and your dad probably was exposed to a lot more. Did he ever hand ring the mercury amalgam?
Probably.
Yeah.
And, practice decades without gloves or masks or.
And I don't think these kids even are aware of it. Explain about what hand wringing amalgam was back in the day.
Well, I never hand wrung. Oh, no, wait, actually we did. That's right. After you mix it, then you would take a little, that's right, that little white round pad, and you would, I guess we wrung the mercury out.
Yeah,
right?
the excess mercury. And one of my when I opened up, there was a guy just about to retire that had carpet in his operatories.
Uh-huh.
And after he passed away and the carpet was lifted up, there were balls of mercury. My boys are running around the office like kicking these balls, and the mercury would hit the wall and bounce into two balls and come back together. It was just crazy.
Well, I never will forget when I first started practicing, a dental assistant mixed up the amalgam. When I said mix, because I had grown up hearing my dad say mix, and I always wanted to be able to say, mix. And so I expected to have the amalgam given to me in a amalgam
condenser.
Yeah. And she just handed me a ball of amalgam, in my hand. And I just thought, well, I guess this will work. So I just put it in and then condensed and carded, but that was different. I don't know if your point is about mercury, what your point may be, but I remember one time working in a laboratory at a hospital and taking a thermometer and spinning it down to get the mercury down at the bottom, thinking, well, that'd be a good way instead of shaking it. So I did that and took the thermometer out and put it in my mouth to take my temperature. And of course, the bottom of it, the mercury just flowed out into my mouth. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm fixing to die here. And so just a story.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's funny we all live, because, like I say, we used to heat up the asbestos in the lab work, and I mean, you would pull it out, and it would be glowing red, and then you would quench it, and it'd explode in the cold water, and you dig your gold crown out. God, things have changed, but I agree with you. So I went totally paper to digital in the year 2000. The white toothache thing was big. I didn't really think that was an issue, but I just. The team needed a deadline, and I told them early 1999, year 2000, we were going to be paperless. And I think the term paperless is the most hilarious term ever, because you're never going to get rid of paper in a dental office. You still have people walking around. They're still printing out schedules for the break room or this or that. There's always paper, but you're right. It's been a long journey from 2000 to 2015 being paperless, and it was. I look back and still think it's a hell of a lot more expensive. Anybody tells you that you're going to go paperless to save money, they're literally insane. I mean, you can't replace a pegboard system and a bunch of pieces of paper and pens and pencils with a whole bunch of electronic equipment and say that it saves you money. So basically, these were some of the problems that made you start Dental Symphony.
That's right. I never will forget that first Monday morning when I sat down with a patient, and the question was about a certain tooth and what we had done. And instead of holding a piece of paper in my hand, a manila chart, and looking, while I'm also looking at the patient and maintaining that relationship, I had to turn away from that patient and look at a computer screen where I only had one screen, for one thing, and so I had to scroll through trying to find out what I had done, and realize eventually, well, I really can't find this out. It's not in a timely way. That was my first experience. Now, saying that, I think it is, I don't think anyone would say that it's not better having all of this information on electronic record, because certainly it is. And the future of that and the ability to use that data, big data, let's say, within a practice and then even outside of that, that's a good thing. We just need to have software that helps, that thinks through everything that dentists do, which begins with, well, first thing I have to do is how quickly can I start working on this patient? And then how can I register my examination? How can I have period charting that is not a beating, because most people will tell you how much they hate period charting, and have it meaningful. Way to, some sexy things like standardizing the preferences of the clinician for the kinds of restorations they want to do, so that all I have to do is be a good diagnostician, chart the findings, and then rather than having to turn around and create a treatment plan, have software that'll do that for me automatically, and then a way to communicate my findings. That's kind of sort of where we stay, just in that realm. And we're feel like we can be helpful to anyone using any practice management system, depending upon what their particular needs are. So, I just really, even though electronic records are not perfect, they're not going to go away, and they keep getting better. And there are some good systems out there.
Right now, I wonder if the American Dental Association meeting's going on, and you're seeing all this talk on Dental Town. I don't even know the specifics about well, anyway, the dental anesthesiologists, they're always trying to be a specialty, and they're upset now about some other regulation. Are you following that right now?
Not closely.
Well, I want to go back to dental anesthesiology, because when you look at it's hard to say, but if you said what keeps Americans from going to the dentist, fear's got to be in the top three. I mean, money's probably number one. And would you say fear is number two?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's fear. So basically it's money. Money's the answer. What's the question? Then fear. So how long do you do dental anesthesiology, or did you used to do it, or how did you get this dental anesthesiologist coming in? And talk more about that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I don't do it because my practice is sort of geared for the referred patient, and those patients are not easy. Dentists don't send easy patients over. They're the hard patients. So I really felt like I needed to sort of stay out on that end of the spectrum and not confuse myself on what my skills were and where was my attention need to be. So I don't do it. I would rely upon an anesthesiologist. As far as having one come every week, that's I'm not sure how easy that is for anyone.
Does he bring in his own equipment, or do you have an operatory decked out with a pulse oximeter, all that stuff? Or
yeah, we do have one room that's a little bit larger, that's prepared just for that. He does roll in a cart early that morning and pulls everything out. Indeed, it is a pulse oximeter, an EKG, and other vitals management. Vital signs.
I think the issue is they're talking about they want dental anesthesia to start measuring the gas exhale, the level of CO2.
Okay, capnography, to measure the CO2,
yeah,
which is a really good tool because you can see the oxygen saturation just from the percent of hemoglobin in the body. You can see that easily. But sometimes it's important to be able to recognize that when the patient is breathing or not breathing more quickly than seeing the saturations drop. And sometimes if you have drapes over patients, you may not see that. So I have gotten accustomed to looking at that wave for capnography. Do I think everybody who does sedation needs that? I just don't know. It seems like a really good tool for what we're doing, though.
Well, I understand why, safety comes first, because, there's 2 million dentists on earth, and every time one person has a tragic accident, we had one in Hawaii this year, and it's just all over social media. I mean, you see it flying over Twitter, Facebook. Huffington Post never misses any story that has the word dentist in it, and they're, probably the largest online player. So it's one of those deals where, look at Cecil the Lion. I mean, one dentist out of 2 million shoots a lion, and all dentists are just tarred with this for 3 or 4 months, and one dental anesthesiology accident and it's just all over. It's just all over social media for like 3-4 months. So maybe if that one extra tool prevents one extra case. But it seems like on these dental anesthesiology cases that they weren't even. It seems like when it goes south, the dentist wasn't even in the ballpark of doing anything right. I mean, that last case in Hawaii, I mean, when the paramedics got there, the patient was still sitting up in the chair and the head was leaned forward while she was running down the hall looking for another doctor and a medical. I mean, no one even got the patient on their back, looked for the airway. I mean, so it seems like when something goes wrong, that nothing even remotely went right. It's not like you're trying to fine tune what to do exactly perfect. It's like, man, this wasn't even in the ballpark. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I would agree that for those things to happen, someone hasn't paid attention, and it's easy to pay attention. All you have to do is have the proper monitors and staff people assigned for. We are all listening to that pulse oximeter. The tone, if the tone of that, as it beeps, if it starts to go down, we know that the saturation is dropping. And we look for it to go up, and we'll do some things like repositioning the head, opening the airway, pulling the tongue out forward, making sure there's nothing in the back of the mouth that might obliterate the air patches. So one has to really, I mean, you can have adverse events, certainly. You can have adverse cardiac events or strokes and those types of situations that are life-threatening and terrible. But in terms of typical IV sedation with the drugs that most of the people use, if you pay attention, you should be able to manage those situations outside of some kind of aberrant thing happening. Now, if I may, one other thing about Dental Symphony that we haven't talked about that relates to this is within the software, there is an emergency response system that is really helpful. I've actually used it a couple of times myself. And that is on a computer in an operatory. If there's an event, then you can initiate the emergency response, and the system is that in every computer in the office, just by pressing the button and saying that there's an emergency, each computer in the office will have a pop-up that will say there is an emergency in this room and this is everybody's job, and it will list that. So that instead of yelling down the hall or whatever, or hearing a bunch of rustling of activity, the whole office is made aware of that immediately. And then at the site where the emergency occurs, you can triage what that issue is: chest pain, breathing problems, syncope, or whatever, and then it'll give instructions on how to manage that. I think it's a real good tool for a dental office to use, if for no other reason than just to practice, so that you're good for handling most common emergencies. And that's with every account. And it doesn't make sense. It goes sense if we're interested in helping preclinically assess that patient so they're treated carefully, and then of course we're going to have something there that helps you manage that patient if there's any kind of problem. They're very rare, but they do happen.
So you said Module 3 was on perio charting? That's
right.
So if you have health history on Module 1 and you have perio charting on 3 and you have all this clinical stuff, one of the differences between your father's generation and our generation was this oral health continuum of they're finding a lot of diseases associated with the bugs that are found in the mouth. Do you think that's getting bigger in dentistry, the oral health continuum, where people are linking other diseases from periodontal disease?
You hear a lot about it. I remember when guys like you and I started, although I'm older than you, there was a move away from what was called the systemic origin of disease. The systemic disease relating from the oral cavity, let's say. The oral cavity seeding organs and creating disease, and that was kind of poo-pooed when I was in school, that didn't occur, and this is not how you're going to be taught. But it seems like a few years ago there seems to be a resurgence of that. And I remember the first time I heard someone say, well, respiratory disease related to oral pathogens, cardiac periodontitis, and the C-reactive proteins increasing the amount of inflammation in vessels and related to cardiac disease. There seems to be a resurgence of that. I've heard some people say the research on that is equivocal, but I'm tending to think that it's probably leaning towards there is more and more interest in infectious disease related to these systemic disease. You remember just a few weeks ago we had a big scare all over the internet about Alzheimer's related to infections from dentistry, and I looked at the ADA evidence base in the ADA and didn't really see much on that. But I'd be curious, certainly would be curious about that. Just in terms of keeping our information up to date on Dental Symphony and what we're telling people. But yeah, I think there's probably certainly something to that. There are organizations now that speak just to that, oral systemic problems. In terms of my practice and my dad's practice, does that make us do anything any differently? I probably not. I mean, but I do tell people, just like I'm sure you do, that, you know, we want your periodontium to be healthy. Everybody does, and the likelihood of problems associated with that elsewhere are going to go down if they're healthy. So keep it healthy. It kind of reminds me of the whole idea, the emphasis on, the information about prophylaxis for patients who have heart disease. It seems more emphasis now is on let's make sure your patients are healthy. The oral infections need to be kept to a minimum, and that's more important than any antibiotics you're going to give them. So that tells me, I guess, that answers your questions. There's just sort of a move, continual move for that. I'm sure there are probably some listening to this who are going to say, you know, Tom, what's wrong with you? It's all over the place. Get on board with that. And I'm not saying I'm not on board, but I think it is a transition.
Well, the human condition is always going to be 20% is going to, you know, take anything you give them and be an extremist. You know what I mean? I mean, you see, you know, extremists in all sectors, religion, politics, you know, you name it. And you know, when sleep apnea started coming out, then of course there's always the few nutbags who think it's going to cure everything from male pattern baldness to acne to, you know, there's the extremes. But I do think what's funny is what goes around comes around is, you know, you can find lots of, dentists saying 100 years ago that they would find someone very sickly and jaundice and run down, and they'd pull out all their teeth and get rid of all that pus and pyorrhea, and then the person would heal up and look better and feel better, just getting all that infection out of the mouth. And it's funny, here it is 100 years later, and no one wants the cure by having full body extraction of all their teeth and be a dentist. But it's funny how 100 years ago, some of the leaders in our profession were noticing a great improvement in the overall health when they pulled out all that sea of infection and pyorrhea and pus and got them all cleaned up. They just...
Well, yeah. Like you have handled lots and lots of toothaches and swollen jaws and things, and I've never heard anybody say, it hurts right here and nowhere else, or it hurts right here, but I generally feel pretty good. I mean, they feel terrible. So, you clean up their mouth, get rid of infection, then, you know, that generally overall they're just going to be a healthier person.
So you do a lot of things. You also have digital impression scanning. You have same day crown milling, CBCT imaging. You place implant. You do all that and endo.
Yes.
So let's go through that. So what is your oral digital impression scanning? What brand did you go with?
I have the TrueDef 3M.
3M's TrueDef. And how long ago did you get that? And are you glad you bought it? And how's that working?
Yeah, I've had it about nearly 3 years. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
How much did that cost?
It was $11,000.
$11,000. And why did you buy it?
Well, I found when I was having my restorations made digitally, as most people are now, I think, and it just seemed like a real mismatch to have an analog impression and making a digital restoration when I could have a digital impression that would match up to make the digital restoration. Plus, the more I saw the digital representation of my impressions, the more problems I had. I was seeing, when I really was honest with myself and looking at impressions, that I would have pulls, I would have bubbles, I would
on
have
the computer screen monitor.
no on the yes, yeah, and
from the True Def. I agree. You're talking about that when you take a rubber impression like a polyvinyl siloxane or I like Impergum 3M with your loops on, you can't really see that margin. But when you use the oral scanner and you see the prep 40 times larger on the screen, you're like, oh my God. And you got to go back in there and make it prettier.
Right. But I didn't say clearly what one of my reasons is that I just felt like there were problems with the polyvinyl siloxane impressions. They just had little defects there that I had grown accustomed to sort of overlooking, and the lab guy can fix that or whatever. Well, they can't fix them if they're digital. So that's one reason. The other reason I went with digital impressions is because it just it did away with having to pour models, mail impressions, ask when they're coming back. It just took away one of the oldest headaches in dentistry. And
what lab do you send your oral scanning impressions to?
Mostly Glidewell, not always, but
and don't they give you a discount when you send in an oral a digital impression, because now they don't have to pay a human to pour up a rubber impression in stone and pay a human to trim a die, and it cuts their costs. So don't they pass some of that savings to you?
I think it's $20 per crown less.
They give you $20 a crown less. So then on that 11,000, so that True Def was just 11,000 one time. There's no per cost of each time you scan or anything like that.
There is a data plan that's anyway from $200 or $300, depending upon which one you get, that provides software updates and also is for the process required in taking the scan and sending it to wherever it's going, whatever lab it's going to go to.
So you gave them 11,000 down. Then you had to buy a plan. How much does the plan cost each month?
I think mine is around $200 a month.
$200, and is that unlimited oral scanning impressions to Glidewell, or do they ding you again on each use?
It's unlimited scans, which to me was critical. I really did not like the other models of where you can only scan 10 or 20 or. Man, I didn't want anybody telling me that. I thought, I want to scan, and I didn't want to think about how much more it's costing.
So you pay them $200 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So then you don't have to buy any polyether, Impergum, or polyvinyl siloxane or alginate, or pretty much, or.
There are times when I'll take impressions. There are times when scanning's not easy. And
okay, why? Go over that. When would you not? When would you want to go back to impression, an analog impression?
Well, let's say that it's a sleep patient, and I've got a lot of work that I need to impress, and they're on the anesthesia clock, and I want to wake them up. Then I'll take an impression, and then we'll pour the impressions and scan the impression, because that's easy to do, and it's easy to you can define your margins real easy with a Bard Parker or whatever. So that's one time. The other is if patient's awake and they just 3M does require the powder, and so it means it needs to stay dry. And so sometimes if it's way back of the mouth, it's kind of hard for them. It's not a panacea for everything. But to tell you the truth, you need to have somebody in your office that is good at scanning. Somebody who's really, really good at that.
And do you do the scanning, or do you have someone else do it?
Rarely do I do it. I have someone that does it who's really good.
I know. I don't understand why these dentists, they'll get a CAD CAM machine, and now all of a sudden they got to be a lab man. But when they had an impression, they never did any of their lab work. They didn't pour up their dies, they didn't trim their dies, they didn't do one damn thing. And then they buy a Cerac, and now they're a glorified lab tech. Now you have CAD CAM too. Is that E4D or Galileos or Sirona? What did you buy?
I have the iOS system, the 150.
The iOS out of Glidewells?
That's right.
Right on. I think you're the first guy podcast interview other than Totola that has that. So you bought the iOS CAD CAM.
That's right.
And how much was that?
58.
Wow, so that's how right. See, I thought you would have gone E4D because it was in Dallas and you're in Fort Worth.
Where is Dallas?
Where's Dallas, Texas?
Yeah, is that near here?
Did you ever go and meet the E4D? Gary Severance and all those guys, they're right up the street from you.
No, I didn't. You know, and to tell you the truth, I was an easy sell for iOS because I was one of, I think maybe you had the first CEREC in Texas way back when. And
way back when was it?
95 maybe.
95, yeah, probably about me too.
I did 1,000 restorations or so with it and liked it, but it was pretty hard back then. And it was pretty labor intensive, I thought. For one thing, one thing that happened is after that, the materials got better. Labs began to get the in-lab CEREC, so I didn't do them. I had kind of a bad taste in my mouth because of that. It was first generation, wasn't real easy, but I was very interested in computers. So a couple of years ago, I was at a meeting and saw the design software for the Fast Design, which connects with the iOS, and it made perfect sense to me. It seemed easy. It was exactly what I thought it should be, in that it uses library templates to make the crowns, so I was more interested in the software than I was in the actual milling machine, because that's kind of like the car that, you know, if you like the music, you know, give me a car with a great radio and I know the car will run. So I wasn't real concerned over, and I probably should have been, but I was quite fine with the iOS. It's a whole lot less expensive. I've done several hundred restorations with it, and I'm very pleased.
Now they're out of they bought that. That was a company out of Southern Cal, wasn't it? It's like San Diego. Do you know the company there? Do you know the founder or anybody down there? I
didn't. I was embarrassingly unaware of anything about the company. I just liked the system.
And the iOS, don't they have a scanner? Why did you have to buy the 3M True Def also, or did you just like the 3M scanner, oral scanner, better than the iOS?
I'm not aware of an iOS scanner. I like the True Def. It, you know, it does have powder, but from what I understand, that does make it a better, more accuracy. I just like it. I wasn't offered a scanner with the iOS, although the iOS, to their credit, is open. And they want to work with any system.
So CBCT, which one did you get?
Kodak 9000.
Carastream?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I got too. Why did you get that one?
I got it about 7 years ago, and I got it because I wanted to place implants, and I just had heebie-jeebies about doing that in the absence of CBCT. And I placing implants. I've not done a lot of implants. I've done not nearly as many as I would like. I've done about 100, but I'm going to start using the surgical guide with that. I got it so that I could do implants, and then I learned, wow, man, I'm seeing all these periapical issues. It's helped me with periodontics. It's helped me with especially diagnosis for toothaches with 2D x-rays that are clear, and then take a 3D and boom, you see a lesion. I mean, I got it for improved diagnosis.
What implant system did you go with?
Straumann.
ITI Straumann. That's Switzerland or Sweden? Switzerland, isn't it? And why did you go Straumann? I mean, that's one of the originals. I mean, when I got out of school in '87, that was already out there. It was Straumann, Brandmark.
Well, I went with it because that's what these oral surgeons were using. I was familiar with the mechanics of that, and they were really good in coming in and getting me set up with the things that I needed and support. And I think it's a good system.
I have so many older oral surgeons and periodontists that telling me that they'll say, because it confused me when Danaher, who had bought the low-cost Implants Direct, turned around and then bought the very high-cost Noble Biocare. And that just didn't make sense to me. Why did they buy the high-cost Mercedes-Benz and the low-cost Chevy? And these oral surgeons and periodontists tell me, they go, you know what? They don't want to be burned. They've been on these Noble BioCares. They work. They know they work. They don't care about the extra cost of the implant. They're charging $50,000 for a full mouth deal, and the last thing they want to do is worry about one of the implants or the interfaces or something. So I think it's amazing how brand loyal the Noble BioCare brand. Well, buddy, that's it. We just hit the hour mark. Tom, thank you so much for doing this with me on a Saturday. Thank you. Tell your dad I just love him to death. That I just think he's just cooler than cool that he's a dentist and made it to 92 years old.
I will do that.
And I think the best marketing you would do if you got 50 dental offices using Dental Symphony, start a thread on Dental Town called Dental Symphony users, and email that link to all the 50 users and say, hey, the more you talk about it, the more feedback you'll have, but the more marketing you'll have, because all these townies will see their friends talking about it, and that might be the best marketing you could do. And that's why I called you to do this. I thought this would be good to let people know that there's other things that merge with your dental office software that's just not the business side, but the clinical side. So thanks you for sharing your story with me. I thought it was an interesting story, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Howard, thank you. It's an honor getting to visit with you. I really appreciate that. Good. You have a good weekend, too.
All right, are you going to watch the Cowboys play, or are you going to get on your bass guitar and start jamming out?
Both.
Both? All right, have a good day, buddy. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.